Good evening and welcome to tonight's creative competition, March 5th, 2021. Before we get started with the competition, we've got some announcements. We do have a few upcoming Zoom presentations. On March 19th, John Scalera will be here to talk about zoo photography. On April 2nd, Louis Kemper will be back, and he'll be talking about night photography. And on April 9th, our own Richard Ader will be doing a presentation on 14 days through Mongolia. Now, I want to make sure people know the Zoom presentations, the Zoom part itself is open to members only, and there will be a link sent out a few days before the Zoom presentation. When it's an outside speaker, like John Scalera and Louis Kemper, they ask that these be for members only, so we do not put them out on YouTube. And when it's a member that gives a presentation, we will put them out on YouTube. So Richard's will be put out on YouTube shortly after he's finished. The other ones are recorded and they will be made available at some point in the future. Also, upcoming competitions. Actually, these are the last two of the year. On March 12th, we have a bee competition, and the deadline for that was actually March 3rd. So it's too late to enter, but we do invite you to join in and listen to the judges' comments. And then on March 26th, we end with the photojournalism night. The deadline for entries on that is March 24th. And that will finish the competition year for this year. One other announcement, we have begun enrollment for spring classes. The Lightroom class starts March 23rd. The Intro to Photoshop Editing starts April 7th. And the Fundamentals of Good Photography starts April 10th. And you can go to the school page on our website, www.clevelandphoto.org, for more information. And I do want to point out we do have a new procedure, a new form for people that are returning to take a class for a second time. So please, that will be on that school page. You'll see something that talks about returning students, and there'll be a button to click for getting that form. Now again, that's for returning students only. New students, if you keep moving down the page, you will find the information about registering and paying for those courses. So we invite you to watch this and most Friday evening meetings at your convenience on our CPS YouTube channel. There's a link on the home page of the website toward the bottom on the left-hand side, or you can open YouTube and search for Cleve Photographic. And again, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and choose to be notified whenever a new video is posted. So again, welcome. This is our third and final creative competition for the 2020-2021 year. Tonight we have 69 images, 32 in the creative category and 37 pictorial. So we'd like to introduce you to our judges for the evening. The first one is Ami Horowitz. Ami is an environmental biologist. He has visited many countries exploring and photographing various environments and their flora and fauna. He's been a nature photographer since he was a teenager, and he's a longtime guest and judge for the Cleveland Photographic Society. And reading for Ami tonight is Dan Lester. Our second judge is Steve Manchuk. Steve became interested in photography through his childhood friend and often co-CPS judge Glenn Petranek. He bought his first camera in 1967 and soon after set up a home darkroom. He was both a school newspaper and yearbook photographer. In 1973, he attended the Naval School of Photography and spent 4 years in the Navy as an aerial recon photographer. Beginning in 1977, he spent more than a decade working as a part-time wedding, school portrait, and commercial photographer. He has been judging for many years, often with Glenn Petranek. He bought his first digital camera in May of 2000, and he and Glenn assembled a slideshow of digital works and became advocates of digital photography. Majority of Manchuk's work is from northeastern Ohio, though his favorite away-from-home destination is New England. And reading for Steve will be Dan Sandy. And our final judge is Dan Rowland. Dan claims to have been a husband, father, soldier, student, teacher, and laborer, and foremost, an artist. He has been a photographer for more than 35 years, with work that has been included in many private and juried shows. He has won awards for both his fine art and commercial photography. He has an extensive film background and has been a student of the zone system for almost 20 years, and Dan feels it is still relevant today. He says he does not shoot in any one genre with any frequency, and many times has found himself photographing architecture, portraits, and products in his studio and outside shooting landscapes all within the same week. He has a studio in Akron where he shoots commercial photography and teaches photography and post-processing. And his website, you can view his website at www.danrowlandphotography.com. And he'll be read by Bill Keaton. His comments will be read by Bill. For those not familiar with the competition, just go over the judging criteria. Each judge will score an image on a scale of 5 to 9. The final score for each image is the total of all 3 judges' scores. Images are judged on 3 criteria: impact, composition, and technique. So tonight we're going to begin with creative. We will be doing comments for all of the images that were submitted. So let's get started with creative.
Dan says, this is a well-done black and white portrait of a Lincoln look-alike. I think your black and white is well done, capturing both the highlights and the shadow detail without being overly contrasty. I found the use of the painter-like effect a little distracting and keep wondering to myself if it would not be better on just the subject or the background, since the background tone is so close to the facial tone.
The image is called 407 Years Ago by Serena Cernick, 20 points.
Ami says, this is a very creative and imaginative picture. I like the colors, clarity, and especially the action portrayed here. Great work.
The image is entitled A Quantum Leap by Susan Bestel, 22 points.
A fun experiment piece that is a bit of a cut above. Offsetting the composition helps give space to the ejected droplets. Lighting is good. I would blacken the table surface as it distracts slightly. It would also suspend the glass in space. A nice added touch.
The image is called A Splash of Lime, Please by Fran Marino, 21 points.
Wonderful use of color, Dan says. I thought this was a really interesting entry. The only thing that kept me from scoring this a 9 was the dark area on the left. The color on the right is so beautiful that my eyes keep wandering to the left, wanting more that isn't there. I think a tighter crop would help to keep the left and right from competing against each other for the viewer's attention.
The image is called Aliens by Marge Brady, 24 points, 3rd place. We're having a little technical difficulty here.
There it goes. Ami says, this is a nice choice of colors and shapes. It gives the feeling of constant move and action. The surrounding lines, stars, may distract from the main subject, though.
The image is called Ball of Light by Marge Brady, 23 points, honorable mention.
Steve says, cute effect executed nicely. I would only suggest cropping out the reflection of the bench in the lower portion of, as it distracts somewhat.
The image is called Blue Dancers 4 by Ronald Wilson, 23 points, honorable mention.
Dan says this is an interesting composition of light and shadow, but I think on the whole it is a bit too dark. Since the bottle appears to be translucent, I would also like to see just a hint of light in the black shadow. I feel this photo has potential, it just isn't there yet.
The image is called Bottle and Shadow by Mike Kopkas, 18 points.
Ami says this is a good utilization of light and details. It clearly gives the viewer a feeling of an old and neglected place.
The image is called Burned Church Light Beams by Glenn Petranek, 25 points, second place.
Steve says, a color theme of silver and gray runs through this abstract, and it gives a feeling of calmness in spite of the vertical format and complex shapes. The tattered white border distracts somewhat.
The image is called CD Hand by Jane Sidney, 19 points.
Pretty cool concept, Dan says. I cannot imagine the time it took to place all of those. I love the flowers and the subject works well with the background. The only critique I have is that your fractal is so beautiful, I find the large flower distracting to be sitting on top and not flowing from the rest of the design. It feels as if there is a step missing.
The image is called Coneflower Fractals by Vicky Wirt, 21 points.
Ami says, I like the choice of colors that are soft and yet vivid. I like the combination of sharp and blurry, but personally I prefer to have a larger portion of the work in focus.
The image is called Deep Reflections by Bob Kowalewski, 23 points, honorable mention.
Steve says, this studio scene has some good elements. The directional lighting is good, but a bit harsh. The hint of background that is cut off at the right begs to be included in its entirety.
The image is called Elsa Lookalike by Fran Marino, 21 points.
Dan says good use of composites and using different elements to tell the story. There are some areas where I think the compositing could have been done better. For example, the halo edge near the forehead. Having the elements overlap might have also given this image a more cohesive feel.
The image is called Father of Lies by Mike Kopkas, 23 points, honorable mention.
Ami says, excellent imagination and use of subject, colors, and background. I like the simplicity and the sharpness of the leaf as well as the interesting shape. The work gives the viewer a sensation of floating and frozen in time.
The image is called Floating by Vicky Wirt, 26 points, first place.
Steve says, a nice repetition of flowers layered nicely. The feeling with this color palette is very pleasant and relaxed. The only unfortunate merge is the second flower in the upper left with the white petals of the far upper left flower.
The image is called Flowers for You by Bill Keaton, 22 points.
Dan says, I think the idea of making a mosaic using mosaics is a clever idea. Overall, I think the image could be a little brighter with a little more punch to the color. Making these adjustments might make the eye in the center stand out a little more from those around it.
The image is called Here's Looking at You by Jane Sidney, 21 points.
Ami says, a fun picture to watch. I like vivid colors, the fact that the pelican is moving and that the terns are watching intently.
The image is called Inspecting the Troops by Wayne Fierstein. 20 points.
Steve says, the overall strong mixed coloring is interesting. More intriguing are the predominant orange light sources. Their shape and sizes leave to the imagination what they may be. Street lamps or alien spacecraft.
The image is called Light in the Morning Mist by Wayne Fierstein. 23 points, honorable mention.
That's good.
Dan says, I like the strong use of color to lead the viewer back to the waterfall. Once there, I wish the waterfall were not overexposed and had more detail. I think a different angle for this photograph might have been made the grid pattern under the water in the front right less noticeable and less distracting.
The image is called Lily Lane by Bonnie Luxo. 19 points.
Ami says both colors and movement were nicely combined here. Although no clear subject, it does make a pleasant picture to look at.
The image is called Maple Grove at Lakeview by Ron Werman. 24 points, third place.
Steve says, a Jules Verne's-ish composition greatly conceived and executed. Elements of steampunk also come to mind. The lights on the Stargazer is wonderful.
The image is called Moonstruck by Jackie Sieski. 26 points, first place.
Beautiful photograph, Dan says, with a beautiful painterly effect, like the three-dimensionality of the roots extending past the edges of the frame. Well done.
The image is called Painterly Orchids by Jackie Sieski. 24 points, third place.
Ami says the colors here are extremely eye-catching. The sharp floating parts with the off-focus background gives a nice feeling of floating. I think that the work would have been better with less objects and less repetition.
The image is called Putting on the Ritz by Ron Werman. 23 points, honorable mention.
Steve says, a nice composition that is well executed. A few thoughts to improve. The overall lighting has a lot of bright elements. If the owl was backlit by the moon, it would be a good idea to lower the overall illumination level of the owl. The smoky sky could have been darkened a bit too, effectively isolating the owl a bit better and reducing distractions.
The image is called Snowy Owl Moonlight by Glenn Petranek. 22 points.
Good sunset photo, Dan says. The tones are well done with details in the shadow and highlight areas. Sunset images are difficult to make unique, and compositionally, I find myself wishing that the photo had been taken about 10 seconds earlier with the sun and most of the beach in front of your subjects. When a subject is moving in a frame, I like to give more room in front of them behind. But an argument could be made for your composition as well.
The image is called Strolling Down the Ocean Shore by Darla Zajac. 21 points.
I like the combination of very realistic with high level of imagination. It gives an atmosphere of Alice in Wonderland, says Ami.
The image is called Ticking Time by Serena Cernak. 21 points.
Steve says some interesting layers of downtown Cleveland loaded with numerous landmarks. The color palette is quite interesting, as in the green and brown color contrasts. One possible improvement might be to make this a vertical image by dropping a bit of the left and right side portions out. It makes the composition even stronger.
The image is called Circle of Eternal Life by Omar Jeffries, 20 points.
Dan says, I love photos of the night sky showing the Milky Way, and you have done well with this one. Your use of a foreground object to give perspective is well done. I think the composition could be a little stronger by cropping a lot of the foreground out, putting more emphasis on the tree and galaxy. The image also seems a little dark in the tree area and could use a little more shadow detail.
The image is called Family Tree by Bob Kowalewski, 22 points.
Ami says this is definitely an upside-down haven. It has a wild use of strong colors combined with black and white. The lack of a solid color, except for gray, gives a strong feeling of restlessness.
The image is called Fraternal Triplets by Bonnie Luxo, 19 points.
Steve says, simple yet elegant and interesting for sure. The almost monochrome wood with the subtle colors of the fairy blend amazingly well. Her placement off-center is good composition.
The image is called Girl in Knothole 2 by Ronald Wilson, 22 points.
Dan says, when I first saw this shot, I really liked the concept, and the photography was done well. I think the lighting on the main subjects could better match the lighting in the scene. Darkening the background and making the trees in the distance a little more out of focus will make the subject stand out a little more. I think this image has a lot of potential and just needs a little more post-production to be a great shot.
The image is called Little Red and the Big Bad Wolf by Susan Bestel, 24 points, third place.
Ami says, technically, this is an excellent picture. Both light and dark areas are featured nicely, with many details visible to us. I admit that it is difficult for me to understand the meaning of the work.
The image is called Losing My Religion by Bill Keaton, 19 points. And that concludes the creative portion. Now we'll move on to the pictorial portion.
Steve says, a quiet moment captured is... I'm just going to start that over. Steve says, a quiet moment captured in tough light, but shadow and highlights are maintained. The glowing blue reflection in the mom's glasses distracts somewhat. Reducing the saturation in the blue might help. Some cropping of the green bushes might help make this moment a bit more intimate by the viewer.
Okay, the image is entitled A Mother's Love by Susan Bestel, 18 points.
I love the use of color here, Dan says, with the red cardinal against the green background. Some of the things that might make this image better would be to not crop in as much. It really brings out the noise in the background. And bring in more of the tail feathers. Also, look for little areas like the area under the branch on the right where there are Photoshop glitches that can be distracting.
The image is called Cardinal on Tree by Maria Diaconou, 20 points.
Ami says this is a very good presentation of the starling. I like the intense colors and the casual way the bird is posing.
The image is called Colorful Bird by Maria Diaconou, 20 points.
Steve says, powerful lighting here makes this specimen pop almost too much. The highlights are harsh and could use a little toning down. Doing so would make this a bit more pleasant to the eye and allow the elements of the entire frame to blend more harmoniously.
The image is called Easter Lily by Joseph Miko, 23 points, second place.
Dan says, nice use of repetition and well exposed, which is the first step in taking a great shot. Most photos of snow scenes are really dark because they are metered incorrectly. That being said, I feel this photo might have a little bit too much contrast, with the darks being a little too dark and detail missing in the lightest snow areas.
The image is called Empty Chair by Kim Kowalewski, 22 points.
Ami says, a picture full of atmosphere. I like the combination of soft colors in the surrounding nature, the sky, the trees, and the sky, with the harsh reality of destruction. I also would move the main building a little away from the center and definitely eliminate the partial structure on the left.
The image is called Falling Down by Leslie Nutt, 21 points.
Steve says, a familiar flower. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm starting again. Steve says, a familiar flower presented up close and personal. Compositionally, it is well placed. The overall brightness of the frame might benefit from a bit of toning down.
The image is called Garden Tulip A Bit Closer by Joseph Miko, 24 points, first place.
Dan says you've done a nice job of pulling together the elements of the story of the passage of time. While the whole image ties together, I would like to see the shoes as the main subject with the man in the background slightly out of focus. I think his right hand is a little too bright, leading your eyes away from the shoes and out of the frame.
The image is called Grandpa's Shoes by Kim Kowalewski, 21 points.
A fantastic picture, Ami says, that draws you in and allows you to hear the sounds and smell of the dust. It is packed with action that creates excitement in the observer. Long shadows, clear details from front to back, all add to this picture.
The image is called Horse Drive 5 by Ronald Wilson, 24 points, first place.
Steve says, seems like a takeoff on the lunar landing and the first footprint on the surface of the moon. The image begs for a small, added element of a contrasting color to make it more interesting.
The image is called Jordan on the Beach by Bonnie Luxo, 20 points.
Dan says, well lit with great contrast, difficult on a cloudy day. What really draws me to a doorway is the symmetry. Not being directly in front of, in this case, detracts from the image rather than enhances it. It would have been interesting, to me at least, to see the perfectly symmetrical image with just a broom to add a bit of whimsy.
The image is called Moroccan Doorway by Richard Ader, 18 points.
Ami states, this work has good details and colors. It tells a good story. I think that shooting it from the Mason side would add more detail to it so the observer could actually see what is done to the stone.
The image is called Moroccan Stonemason by Richard Ader, 21 points.
Steve says, good silhouettes and the blue water behind the birds is rendered well. The only possible distraction to this composition is the bright lower portion which draws the eye down and away from the featured subjects. A bit of darkening in post might help.
The image is called Nightfall by Bill Keaton, 22 points.
Dan says, beautiful morning light. I always have envied those who could get up early to shoot. The only thing I would do to improve this shot would be to darken the grass in the foreground about half a stop in post. Once that is done, the grassy area becomes almost invisible inviting your viewer to move farther into the scene.
The image is called Off to Fish by Leslie Nutt, 21 points.
Ami states, this is a good presentation of orchids. The details are great and, excuse me, the details are great so a tiny person can see in each flower like a little prince.
The image is called Orchids in Black and White by Rosemary Flanagan, 23 points, second place.
Nice.
Steve says, wonderful setup and execution. The catch lights in the eyes make those brown eyes beg for attention. Only one improvement. Remove the background line in the lower right of the frame as it distracts a bit.
The image is called Stop and Smell the Roses by Barb Cerrito, 20 points.
Dan says, you have some exciting elements in your photograph. It is not often that one gets a sunset, city skyline, and sailboat in the same shot. Two things that could really improve this image would be decreasing the contrast so that there is more shadow area and the highlights are not blown out on the buildings. Second, give the ship a little more room on the right side so it is not bumping up against the frame of the photograph.
The image is called Sunset Cruise by Joe DiStefano, 20 points.
Ami says, this is a great portrait of the dog. I like several points here. The details in both light and dark areas, the clear color and catch light in the eyes, and especially that the dog behaves like a professional model, looking forward at an angle.
The image is called Tin Dog Profile by Barb Cerrito, 23 points, second place.
Steve says, good exposure and focus. The composition is weakened in two ways. The lower portion of water draws the eye away from the trees, and yet if cropped out, oh man, I really just screwed that one up. Sorry, folks. I'm going to start over. Good exposure and focus. The composition is weakened in two ways. The lower portion of water draws the eyes away from the trees, and yet, if cropped out, the trees alone do not provide enough interest.
The image is called Watercolors by Bob Kowalewski, 20 points.
Dan says, well done rendition of a subject most of us never see at this level of detail. Your use of exposure and contrast brings out all the fine detail, reminding me of specimen photos I have seen in books. As a zone system guy, I never like to see black on black as you have in the bottom left corner, preferring to show some detail if detail is present.
The image is called Andean Condor by Marge Brady, 23 points, second place.
Ami states, this picture shows a good combination of colors. I have two remarks that may add to the work. The background is a bit too busy and takes the eye away from the subject, and the bottom cropping should include all the shadow.
The image is called Apple and Shadow by Mike Kopkas, 23 points, second place.
Steve says, a common subject presented nicely, good exposure and focus, yet as a common subject, such as deer, in fairly even light, the challenge is to provide some unusual element or expression to elevate it to something more.
The image is called Baby Deer by Kim Wachaleski, 22 points.
While there is a lot to see in this photograph, Dan says, your use of leading lines and a subject at the end of the hall help to keep this image from being too busy. I feel the lighting is a little flat and could also be brightened just a touch.
The image is called Brecksville Ruins by Richard Ader, 24 points, first place.
Ami states, this is a fun picture to watch. I like that it shows a wide range of emotions with a combination of good colors and details. However, I would crop out the leg on the right.
The image is called Brothers, Yuck by Fran Marino, 21 points.
Steve says, technically, a good night exposure. Color is spot on, 2. Compositionally, I struggle for the center of interest or a flow. I believe the left 40% is almost unnecessary. The interesting portion seems to be the bright street reflections and the terminal tower illuminating the darker background.
The image is called Cleveland Ambiance by Jackie Sieski, 24 points, first place.
Dan says, I have photographed frozen bubbles myself, and they are not easy. I love the crystalline structure that forms as a bubble freezes, and like snowflakes, no two bubbles are the same. You have controlled your exposure well, maintaining the detail in the brightest of the areas. One way to improve this image would be to watch your edges where the snow meets the background. I think the hazy area there on the left is a little distracting.
The image is called Double Bubble by Vicky Wirt, 24 points, first place.
Ami states this is a good presentation of the tulip. I like the color combination of the flower with the soft color and few details of the background.
The image is called Garden Tulip by Joseph Miko, 24 points, first place.
Steve says, good pattern of flight captured tack sharp and an impressive blue sky. One improvement, reduce the noise in the sky in post as it is a bit grainy.
The image is called Incredible Precision by Joe DiStefano, 23 points, second place.
Well done, Dan says. It's hard to get little birds in action. Their quick movements and quick pace make it difficult to know where to aim your lens. The overall exposure and contrast is nice, but it looks like you might have over-applied the noise suppression, losing the finer details in the feathers.
The image is called Kingfisher, Looky Looky What I Got by Serena Cernick, 23 points, second place.
Ami states this picture has good lighting, good details, lots of atmosphere. It could be titled The Last Winter, as my eyes are directed to the leaning tree, wondering when it will be claimed by the lake.
The image is called Lake Erie Erosion by Leslie Nutt, 23 points, second place.
Steve says, a great place for travelers and especially photographers. The lighting, the unique color palette, and flowing lines combine for a great image. A human or animal subject somewhere here could lend scale to the image.
The image is called Light in the Canyon by Jane Sidney, 24 points, first place.
Dan says one of the first things I look for in a raptor photo is, are the eyes in focus? You have nailed that in this one. To improve your photo, I would suggest darkening the tree in front of the bird so it doesn't compete with your subject.
The image is called Majestic Image by Wayne Fierstein, 22 points.
Ami states this is a great presentation of a perfectly balanced, vivid colors, frozen motion, excellent choice of front and back, and ideal cropping. I generally don't like pictures to be centered unless centering is done to strengthen a picture effect, as presented here. With pictures like this, I like to joke and say, this picture has only one negative point. I did not take it.
Okay, the image is called Making a Splash by Ron Werman, 24 points, first place.
Steve says, the composition is wonderful. I am of the opinion that the white background, if changed to pure black, would render this image dramatically. The white background tends to make the flowers look dark by comparison.
The image is called Orchid Etchings by Rosemary Flanagan, 23 points, second place.
Dan says photographs of iconic scenes are difficult because they have been seen by so many times. Your location here really brings out the opera house in the city. To improve this photo, I would add more color and contrast. I would also have used a polarizer to reduce the reflection of the sky on the water, making it darker to add more drama. I also think the crop is a little tight, losing part of the opera house and just squeezing in the bridge. If I didn't have a wider angle lens, I might have taken 2 photos and stitched them together to give the opera house and the bridge more room to breathe after the image was cropped.
The image is called Sydney Harbor by Maria Diaconou, 20 points.
Ami states, the picture is a nice way to convey emptiness, yet loaded with sharp details. I like the choice of gray colors with a touch of red. It is very effective. One suggestion, to crop out the right side wall of the stall. Without it, the picture would look larger and more open.
The image is called Steel Trolley Diner by Glenn Petranek, 21 points.
Steve says, caught the moment well. It almost appears like a portrait instead of an action capture. The lack of blur freezes the subject perfectly so we can get a good look at this canine in flight.
The image is called Weekend Bar Hopper by Barb Cerrito, 23 points, second place. And that concludes tonight's competition. If you'd like more information about competing, or if you're interested in joining the Cleveland Photographic Society, please visit our website, clevelandphoto.org. Thanks to all of our judges for their comments, and thanks to those that read for them. And thanks to all who entered, and congratulations to our winners. If you have any feedback, we'd be happy to hear it. Just send us your feedback at info@clevelandphoto.org. So thank you. Have a good night. Stay safe, everyone. Talk to you soon.